All right, and we're live. Libby Triolo back again. First episode, she was on the Monkey Mind podcast, episode 95, talking about spheres of control. Last episode we did was on emotional intelligence. So if you want to get an intro about her, the work she does, her background, again, refer to episode 95. A lot of great bits in there, a lot of great information, but all the info and the intro about her is in the beginning of that episode. So we're just going to get right into it this time around. This episode is on self-awareness, how to generate it, and why it's important. And then, of course, we've got a listener question, so that'll be at the end. Make sure you stick around for that one. And yeah, let's get into it. Self-awareness, how to generate it, and why it's important.
Yeah. Um, uh, Self-awareness, I think, to me is one of the most crucial factors in terms of progressing towards your goals, right? You have to understand where you are, what in me needs to shift or change or be added to get where I want to go, right? And so to do that, you have to have that self-awareness and that reflection and accountability to like give an honest opinion of where I'm at currently, right? And that's hard for a lot of people to do because there's some ownership in that, feels uncomfortable sometimes to almost admit our faults or our shortcomings. Um, but in the long run, like having that self-awareness, being able to do that and do it well, is going to serve you in the long run. So self-awareness is the ability to understand your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors, and then how they're impacting you. And in this case, for athletes, how they impact your performance. There's two types. There's internal self-awareness, so understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your emotions, your triggers, whatever that might be. And then there's external self-awareness, so like recognizing how others are perceiving you, like your teammates, your coaches, how you impact an environment. And I think that one is really crucial in terms of athletics because regardless, even if you are participate in a more individualized sport, you still have people around you, right? You still have coaches, you still have opponents, judges, referees, whatever it might be, right? The people that support you, your family, you have to understand how you impact that environment. Um, yeah, so this is really important and crucial because we talked about in the last episode, right? Like emotional regulation is a big part of emotional intelligence, and that helps to hone in your focus and improve your performance. To have that, you have to have self-awareness to understand even what your emotional experiences are. um, and then the self-awareness is huge, especially in people who work with me. You have to be self-aware enough to understand what your mental blocks are. What are we even working on here? Right. So, what are my mental blocks? What are my limiting beliefs? What are the behaviors that reinforce those limiting beliefs that are going to keep me stuck? Ultimately, that's what we have to change to reduce or eliminate the mental block to build your confidence and move you forward. Um, so, building a self-awareness is, there's really four main things you can do, right? So first is building your emotional intelligence. We talked about that in the last episode. So again, being able to like work with your emotions and see them as information rather than value judgments about yourself or getting too wrapped up in emotions. So having that emotional intelligence and regulation. Um, and then the second thing you need to do is you have to reflect regularly. Just like any mindset skill, it requires consistent conscious effort, right? You can't just like have one moment of self reflection and awareness and think that that's what's going to carry you through a season, right? It's you're reflecting constantly. And then you have to, the third part of consciously and consistently working on your awareness. Again, you have to do it on a regular basis. It's just like anything, right? Like any athletic skill, you're not just going to shoot 100 pucks one time and be like, oh yeah, I'm solid, I'm
Yeah.
good, that's going to carry me through, right? Like that's not how it works.
Mhm.
So same thing with any of these mental mindset tools. And then the last one is seeking feedback. And I think this is what's counterintuitive about self-awareness is that because it's about us, we think we can do that in isolation, and you can't, right? You can't have true self-awareness in isolation because we need again, that external self-awareness. How are we impacting environments? How are other people perceiving me? Whether I have to, put a lot of value judgment into other people perceive me or not, I do need to be aware of it, right? Like how my message is being received by other people. I'm sure you, like, as a coach, like, you were thinking about that all the time. Like, how am I going to explain this to this age group of people versus this next age group? Like, you have to shift the message to be perceived in the way that you want,
Correct.
right?
100%. I agree with that. I think it's important. One thing I wanted to ask about, and obviously we'll
Mm-hmm.
get into more of like the
Yeah.
tools and all that stuff, but one thing I wanted to ask that's like just immediately coming to mind with all this that I've been hearing a lot about lately,
Mm-hmm.
is like performance journals and just journaling in general,
Yeah.
to develop self-awareness because I do think with if I can just put myself in, when I was playing, and obviously now that I coach full time as well, I do
Yeah.
understand like the lifestyle of it. You're going from practices to games to skill sessions, and then all of a sudden the day is over, and it's
Yeah.
like back up again, car rides, practice, games, skill sessions. So it's hard for athletes to take a second after a game or in the car ride to like kind of reflect. So
Mm-hmm.
and again, not to jump the gun here, but like is a good tool to develop self-awareness, um, I guess quicker or just in general. Would that be through journaling? Do you recommend that to your athletes? Do you find that to be a good tool that a kid can get like a notebook and just kind of write like simple stuff? They're young. Like,
Yeah.
what did I do good today? What did I do bad? And then they just look at that and then work on it, right? Like I'm curious because that's something I've been hearing a lot lately, and if that's something that you recommend or you do with your athletes, kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I personally, there's people who can do this. I'm not one of these people that can just like free journal, just like sit down and like write about stuff. I'm not good at that. I'm aware enough to know that that's not how I need something more structured.
Yeah,
So part of the things that I provide to my athletes, and I'm happy, like if anybody's listening to this episode and wants to email me, I have pre and post work journals, different kinds. Like some are more in depth, some are super quick and just like a couple questions, but tracking, right?
quickly,
We
can you
need to
just plug your
see.
email in there? We'll put it in the show
Oh
notes.
yeah,
Just quickly plug in your email
yeah,
since we have it.
yep. It's Libby Libby at Libby Triolo coaching.com.
Perfect. Okay, and we'll
Yep,
put that in the show notes,
yep,
so you can see
yep.
it there and access it. But all right, I just wanted to throw that in there that we had it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm happy to share those with you because that that is a way, and you have to build that into practice, right? So, um, with the tracking, you need to be doing a pre and a post work journal. That's what I call it, right? So, um, pre, it's like, okay, let me check in with my body, and this will get to the listener question too. But like, how's my body feeling? Did I get enough sleep? Do I feel hydrated enough? Like, right? Like, that is going to help us to identify, like, if I had a bad practice, let me think about the rational reason why, right? Maybe I didn't sleep enough. If I had a bad game, right? Or maybe it's deep in the season and this is a longer season than I've played. Like if I'm tracking and I have that information and data, it's a lot easier for me to look at and find the source of my struggle versus getting really down on myself and saying, well, maybe I just can't do this. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
just not good enough, right? We want information. So a pre-work journal, checking in on your physical and then your emotional. Like how am I feeling today? Like we're all athletes, but we're humans first, right?
Yep.
So maybe I got in a fight with a friend or like where am I at emotionally? What am I bringing to the rink or the court or whatever that maybe is kind of in my head? Like I'm emotionally in this place. And then you do the same after, right? Like so post work is like how's my body feeling? You know, how am I feeling emotionally? And then in the pre, like this is a part of the pre-game routine. Everybody should have a pre-game routine. Like that's how you transition from life outside of your sport to dialed in for your sport. Um, goalies are typically the best at this because they're just overly superstitious also.
Yeah.
But there's value in that, right? Doing the same thing to prepare yourself. I always recommend that your practice routine should have the bare bones, at least for your game routine. Obviously, timing's different, all of that, those things, games is going to look a little different. But again, the more you practice these things, the more consistent you are. That's an environment you can control. That's a headspace I can control. If I'm a player that struggles with performance anxiety when it comes to the game, I want to create an environment at practice that feels more in my control, that feels like I perform better. What elements of that can I bring to game day? Right.
Can
So
we
I want to
dive
set
into
myself
that?
up. Sorry.
Can we dive into that?
Yeah.
Um, because that was something that I was really good at doing.
Yeah.
Was getting super in my head before games.
Sure. Me
So,
too.
so how can an athlete who, and I think it's good. You should feel nerves. You should feel like an
Yeah.
energy like in your body. But then it becomes a point where it's detrimental. So to the
Right.
athletes that are out there listening who are awesome in practice, and then when it comes before the game, they can't, it's obviously there, but they can't
Mhm.
produce that or bring that in a game.
Yeah.
Um, what do you mean by like make that environment in practice to prepare themselves for the game? Is that how you worded it? How would you suggest like what would you tell an
I want it
athlete?
to mirror as
Yeah,
best
yeah,
as it
like
can.
just basically try and mentally put yourself in like a game mindset during a practice or yeah, just kind of curious.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple elements to that, right? So pre-practice, obviously everybody has to prep for that. Maybe you're eating a shake or whatever it might be. You eat a snack. You have to get ready. You have to get there at a certain time. Like there's an element of practice and game that mimics itself, right? So you got to build in time to not just physically prepare for practice or game, but mentally. So I always recommend to my athletes setting intentions because this brings it back to what I can control, right? Like what happens in performance anxiety, especially the kids that are good in practice, because that's a low pressure environment. I mess up, I just try again, right?
Hmm.
Games not doesn't necessarily work like that, right? Like you're not replicating the same play over and over, or drill, whatever it might be. So, what gets in people's heads with performance anxiety is the increased pressure that comes with the game,
Hmm.
right? So, for athletes, you got to bring it back to what you can control. Performance anxiety, kids who get really sucked into their heads, they're really outcome focused. So that breeds fear of mistakes, fear of failure. Like you're like putting all this pressure on yourself to like not make mistakes, to produce plays, right? To win games. There are so many things in those three things that are outside of your control. Can't control what your teammates do, can't control what opponents do, what refs do, what coaches do in terms of your ice time or whatever, right? Like
Yep.
when you're too outcome focused, that then gets spirals up your anxiety, right? Because now I'm trying to mentally control things that I don't have control over. That's what your anxiety is trying to do. Trying to prep you. What if this happens? What if this happens? Right? So bring it back to what you can control. Set intentions. I tell athletes all the time, you should be setting intentions for practice. You should be setting intentions for games. They should be role specific and directly within your control. Your attitude, your work ethic, right? Your positioning, your technique, like the things that I can impact and control, that's what I have to focus on. And this goes back to like we talked about in the last episode, we talked about mistakes, right? If I make a mistake and not getting too caught up in that, bring it back to your intention. Hypothetically, like say you're a forward and your intentions are to um, skate hard on your forecheck and your back check, right? Like um, keep some good vision on the ice, like make accurate, crisp passes, like whatever it is that your role on the team, bring it back to those things you control. So I always say, like, practice, you want to set like 1 to 3 intentions, right? I always say something about your work ethic and then probably something about your like actual role or position on the team. And then games, I would say, depending on your level, 3 to 5. What are the 3 to 5 things I'm focusing on that are going to bring value to my team? That is my job to do,
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
right?
Huge. Yeah.
If I focus on those things, right, I could get caught up in the moment of, oh, I made this mistake, or like, oh, what if this happens, or whatever. Bring it back to that. Can I control those things? No. What are my intentions for this game? What are my intentions for this practice? So when I say you want to replicate practice to game, I want you to replicate your pre-game routine, right? Setting some intentions. And then I also want you to, the mentality you're bringing into practice or games, right? Practice your reset routine at practice. You make a mistake in the drill, do your reset routine, which we talked about in the last one, physical cue, the deep breath, verbal cue. Practice it there. So when you have to do it in a game, because you're going to mess up at some point, right? That feels like second nature. That feels like something my body and my brain recognizes is how I reset,
Hmm.
right?
I want to highlight the thing you just said about what are the three things that make me successful or that I'm good at that I can bring to the team.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's such a huge like self-awareness thing, which I don't know, I think it helps an athlete navigate their level of success a little bit quicker, like what they can bring to a table. Like that's a good homework thing that not a lot of athletes can do, and it'll take like, I don't know, 3 minutes. Just
Yeah.
we think about, okay, what do I notice about myself that I'm really good at? And it might be like I'm big, I can skate, and I have a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
So like, okay, those are three really good things that you're good at. Try and use your feet,
Yeah.
use your size and use your shot and get to those areas of the ice. And then like it now takes everything and like go from really clouded and a little bit distorted about like what kind of player I am. Like that's such
Yeah.
a major self-awareness piece if you can like narrow it down to three things that you're good
Right.
at that you can focus on and then just like dial those in practice. Anytime you have an opportunity to use your feet, anytime you have an
Yeah.
opportunity to use your body, use your shot, use it. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you find yourself having some success and then you build confidence from that, right? Like
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight that because that's so important because it can um, take the time it takes for you to like figure out what kind of player you are. And
Yeah.
when you can figure that out earlier, that doesn't mean you can't
Mm-hmm.
branch out and produce other things to the team or for yourself, but it allows you to figure out what you're really good at and then like you're really good at that and
Right.
earlier and then you can start to like work on the things that you're not so great at. I really wanted to bring that to the forefront because
Yeah.
I think it's such an important thing that a lot of like you mentioned it last episode about the Vinny Maltz episode, like
Yeah.
everyone wants to be the goal scorer. But like, okay, great. Like, everyone can chip in and score goals, but there are guys that put up those 30, 40 goals a year,
That
right?
are that put up the numbers to, yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe that's not you, but there's another thing that you can be really good at that you and that 30, 40 goal scorer can now make it to the same level, just doing a
Mm-hmm.
couple different things. And then you make it to the same level because if you're just the best at what you do,
Right.
and own that with that self-awareness, like that's just like I think another thing that limits players is not really knowing what they bring to the table and how to develop that.
Right. And that goes back again to that place of we can't develop self-awareness, especially kids, right? In isolation.
Hmm.
Go to your coach. Say, Coach, what do you see are my biggest strengths? Right? How do you see me? What do you see my role on this? What is my role on this team? Right? Like you said, there are some people that are goal scorers. That is their role, right?
Hmm.
When there's 2 minutes left and we're trying to, tie up a game or win a game, like that's the person you're like, hey, I need you to score right now, right? There are other players that like there's so many different styles, right? Like, are you a grinder? Are you like more of a defensive minded defenseman? Like, stay home. Are you more of an offensive minded defenseman? But we get this idea of what we ideally want to be or who we think we are, or, my favorite player is Connor McDavid and this is what he does. But that's not me, right? I have to bring it back to me. What am
Yep.
I good at? What are my strengths? So don't do it by yourself. Use your resources.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I love that. I think asking a coach is a huge thing that um I will say a lot of the kids I work with are good at it, but
Yeah,
um I think it's important to ask and get feedback and get a different perspective than from what you see, because what you see might be very different from what they see. So,
right. Well,
um,
and you make a great point too, right? There's things you maybe want to add to your game that it aren't your strengths right now, but that's part of, you want to challenge yourself to develop those skills. But you can't just say, I want to do this and think it's going to happen. Then it's like,
mhm,
okay, this is a skill I want to have. Now I have to work backwards. How do I get from where I am? And I have to acknowledge where I am to get where I want to go.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, that's awesome. That's gold right there. And I don't know, is there anything else we want to touch on self-awareness here and generating it, why it's important before we get into our question?
My only other thing is like the intention setting, right? As a like a pregame, right? Or and visualization, which I think is going to connect to our question. But then you have to do the post reflection. And it doesn't have to be right after the game. I get it, right? You got to get out of the locker room, whatever it might be. But at some point, post performance, post practice, post game, you have to sit down and say, okay, these are my intentions. How did I do?
Mhm.
Give yourself like a peek in a pit. This went well today. This didn't go so well. This is how I'm going to address it at the next practice. Like make a plan, right? And reflect on those intentions. A lot of your intentions for most of your season are probably going to remain the same, right? That's the skill you're developing, or that's the thing I need to focus on to build confidence. Those are going to remain the same, but maybe then it becomes okay. I feel like I'm doing really well at this intention that I set, right? I'm going to add a new one. I'm ready. I have the mental capacity and the space to say this one feels really automatic to me. This one feels like just another natural part of my game. I'm going to add this next piece,
Yep.
right? So you have the post game has to be, you have to reflect, and that's where you get the data to, should you hit a slump, should something not go your way, I can look and say, okay, I felt the best after practice when I did this, this, and this. Or I felt the best after a game when I did X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
I didn't feel great when this happened. All right, let me dig into why that is
Mhm.
happening. So
Yeah.
the post game is just as important as the pre-game.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I don't know. I feel like that's something that maybe I was told growing up. I just never really took seriously. And
Oh, I never did this. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I never did any of these things. And like it, I just don't, I feel like there's a part of it, like this wasn't really as like talked about as much. Like I think there is a more openness around the mental game and mindset stuff in this day and age. Um, but yeah, I mean, so many, if you just did these things, like they're simple, but not always easy until it becomes a habit.
Mhm. And I think psychologically it gives you something to look forward to and less to
Yeah.
dwell on. Like if you're like
Yeah.
the peak's easy, the pit, it's like, what did I not do well on? Instead of
Yeah.
just having that pit and not writing about what you're gonna do to work on it and that
Right.
intention for the week, all you're doing is just now dwelling on it. But if you now take it, okay, I was really bad at this today.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm gonna do in practice this week to work on.
Right.
Instead of just dwelling on how bad you were at that thing, now you're going to give yourself something to look forward to work on in practice. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's cool to see like how we can just take the negatives and find like again like reframe that perspective and look at it in a different way that allows us to have a different relationship with it and gives us something to look
Yeah.
forward to, as opposed to be negative about.
When we talked about in the last episode, like getting caught on mistakes in a game, right? And it derails the rest of the performance, right?
Yep.
If you're intentional and you reflect on your performance after, then you can tell yourself in that moment, like there's a time and place for that. I will do that later. I will think about the mechanics or why that broke down.
Mhm.
Right now, it's not it,
Yep.
right? But so many players don't do that. So they get caught in it in the moment because they don't have the practice of giving themselves time and space to reflect on that after,
Yep.
right? So
Yeah.
that's just another little,
No, no, no. I love that. That's great. Cool. I want to get into
yeah,
this question here if you're ready for it.
yeah.
The question is how to overcome mental blocks from injuries.
Yeah. Those crop up because we start, you initially feel like you don't trust your body, right? Like this part of my body has been hurt or damaged, and I don't feel as confident trusting that I can do the things that I did pre-injury, right? So
Yep.
we get in our head. So my biggest thing with injury is when it happens, you have to like visualization is such a powerful tool, such a powerful tool. And it's really powerful for injury, like really powerful for injury. So, visualizing that, if you're out, like you legitimately can't play or practice, right? Your injury's that bad. Like you can get in mental reps, right? To keep up those neural pathways for that muscle memory, right? Envisioning yourself getting back on the court, ice field, whatever it might be, right? Like visualize your body working the way you were working,
Hmm.
right? So doing that while you're injured, right? You can also visualize your body, like your body healing, right? Visualize like positive, and like this kind of sounds a little woo woo sometimes to me, but it's like really true and powerful. Like you visualize your body healing, right? Like I visualize my body like getting back some mobility, and I visualize myself like being able to do the thing I did before. So visualization is huge for injury. When you're dealing with it, when you're trying to heal, and then getting over the mental block when, okay, now I've been cleared. I can get back out there, right? So I would set some intentions around that, right? I'm not going to go out there my first time out and just go, full out. Like I'm just not, right? That's how you get in your head. Okay, well, I can't do this thing. If I go and try to like prove myself to myself or to someone else, like that's where you're going to get really in your head, right? And then you start to play scared, which then probably, can lead to more a re-injury,
Hmm.
right? So set some intentions. Okay, this is my first day back. These are the things I'm going to focus on. I'm going to really focus on, feeling confident. I'm going to skate at 60% today,
Hmm.
50%, whatever, right? Depending on what the injury is. Like set the intentions, right? I'm going to say it was a successful day and I felt comfortable if these three things happen on the ice, on the court, whatever.
Hmm.
And then again, that tracking, those pre and post work journals. How's my body feeling? How's it feeling before? How's it feeling after? Right? What felt weak today?
Yeah.
Right? What am I doing to address that? Am I going to physical therapy? Am I doing extra stretching or training outside of scheduled practice? Whatever. But it's like
Sure.
bring it back again to what you can control. What can I control in this situation? And how do I navigate that versus giving into the fear and the anxiety around the injury,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, so a
So
lot of it
that's
kind of is just like tools that we've talked about already. It's
absolutely
just relating it to a different, like, I guess, subject or subject of athletics, whether it's injuries
yeah.
or breaking out of a slump. It's a lot of the same stuff. It's just writing down like what can you do,
Mm-hmm.
action steps, make sure
Mm-hmm.
you do those. And then you brought
Mm-hmm.
an awesome tool, which I think is important. And there's a lot of talk about woo-woo with like the whole mental performance and
Sure.
psychology and all these type of things, but it is reality, like visualizing yourself getting healthy. Like there's a baseball player, I think on the Yankees, who like I don't know, got the hitting record. Like I think it was like 2 years ago. I don't remember
Sure.
exactly what it was. It was like viral on Instagram, and he talked about how he would like take swings in front of the mirror while he was at home.
Yeah.
And I think he did mention that there's like a sports psychology thing about mental reps are the same as physical reps. Your body doesn't
Yeah. They
actually know
are.
the difference. So I think that's an important thing that like, yeah, it's woo woo, but like it's been proven and I don't have the
There's a
article.
lot of neuroscience around it. Like
Yeah,
they've seen that it lights up the same areas of your brain when you imagine yourself doing it as physically doing it. Like
yeah,
it's not a soft science. It's been medically studied and proven. So
totally.
I I get that part of it, like being kind of feeling like, oh, woo woo kind of, and sometimes I feel like that, but like if you do it, you are building, you're keeping, and if you're injured and you're practicing reps in your head, or you're practicing getting back out there and running or lifting or skating or whatever it is, like you're keeping those neural pathways firing, which is what we want, right? Like your brain is kind of like, you don't use it, you lose it. Like the neural pathways are
Yeah.
always changing. So if I'm not using those because I'm hurt, because I'm physically not out there doing it, I should be mentally doing it
Yep.
to keep them strong.
Hmm.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I uh I love it and I completely agree. I think that's awesome because a lot of people, I mean, I've had injuries where you're out for a bit and you just kind of feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're hopeless kind of like you're like, yeah, I'm doing my PT, but it's like that's about it. That's just like the bare minimum. Everyone who gets injured does PT. Like I'm still
Right.
like doing nothing technically, I guess. That was my mindset even, I don't know. But
Yeah.
this is great tangible stuff that people who are going through injuries or have gone through or may go through an injury can like take it and be like, okay, like I can write some things down that I got to do. And then if I check them off the list, then I've done my job. And then here's some
Right.
things that now I can make use of my time that I'm instead of being at practice or like away from practice if I still show up, and I can
Mm-hmm.
like visualize myself getting reps. And it's a way for you to kind of mentally stay engaged while also
Mm-hmm.
mentally getting reps that physically,
You can't
positively
do right now.
affects you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome. I think that's super beneficial information. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that we want to add to that or to the episode, but I just I'll let you go ahead here. But I again, like, this is the third time you've come on, and I'm super
Yeah.
great, appreciative of you doing this. And all this is such important information that, again, I can't thank you enough for sharing with the world and with our listeners
Yeah.
and with me, because selfishly, I'm learning a lot. So thank you. And
No, that
yeah,
I could talk about this stuff for hours, honestly. And big thing for me is I'm just passionate about getting these tools in as many people's hands, right? Like I want athletes to be successful and go as far as they can and not be limited by their minds, right? Like the mental game shouldn't be the thing that holds you back, right? And too often I think it is for a lot of athletes. It's the thing that prevents them. They get in their own way of kind of their dreams and their goals because what's happening between their ears isn't as strong as like the physical talent that they do have and the potential they do have. So for me, I love to be on the podcast and talk about these things because it's important.
hmm no, I obviously I agree because I'm
Yeah.
here with you, but no, I think it's the separator. That oftentimes, like you said, holds people back when it should be a thing that catapults you forward. So,
Right.
um, and separates you. So again, I appreciate you. And if there's anything else that you want to add to this, feel
I
free.
think, yeah. If anybody wants the pre post work journal, I'm happy to email it to you. Just send me a quick message.
Yep, and we'll have that in the show notes. So,
Cool.
again, Libby Triolo, thank you so much.
Thanks for
Greatly
having me.
appreciate your time and effort towards all this, and look forward to having you on again and discussing some more topics and keep the train rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Thanks.